In Ice Age Europe, a person from Rotterdam could traverse the Rhine River downstream and eventually end up in London. This is not because of some magical undersea passage, but because these two areas were connected by land, and the Thames was only a tributary river of the Rhine. But then the glaciers melted, Doggerland sank, and watery waves were swept in between. Spring Break and Sealand was called off. The consequences of Great Britain becoming an island were drastic. While Rome was busy meeting its maker, the Franks crossed the now smaller Rhine and made an empire in Gaul. Getting to Britain was too much of a hassle after all. This left the Celtic Roman Britons to govern the island by themselves. And by govern the island by themselves, I mean get invaded by outside forces. Picts from Scotland and Scots from Ireland, don't ask, profited off of the Roman abandonment and frequently raided Brittonic settlements. So in response, the Britons did the thing that made Rome fall in the first place: hire mercenaries. Angles, Saxons and Jutes were peoples from Denmark and Germany who came to defend Britain in exchange for land and payment. But the Britons did not hold up their end of the bargain. The Anglo-Saxon mutiny pushed the Britons to the edges of the Isle: Cornwall, Wales and Strathclyde. Some even fled to what we now call Brittany and Galicia. The petty kingdoms rising from the ashes of the aftermath were distinctly Anglo-Saxon and Jutish. The period of time in which they ruled is known as the Heptarchy, which implies that there were only 7 kingdoms, but that's not entirely true. We'll meet many other smaller kingdoms along the way, but those were often subjugated by one of the Big 7. Even the Big 7 themselves were often conquered by others. But even then, it's not possible to discredit their massive influence on what we today know as England. The Angles formed the kingdoms of East Anglia, Northumbria and Mercia. The Saxons formed Essex, Wessex and Sussex, and dude, that's like the easiest joke we can make. The viewers aren't gonna laugh at that. I will. And the Jutes formed Kent. The Angles were the lucky bastards who got to name the place. So those poor Saxons had to settle for 3 whole German states: Lower Saxony, Saxony-Anhalt, and Saxony, as well as a ducking duck. Meanwhile, the Jutes got this peninsula where nobody lives. But I mean, hey, if you do live in Jutland, then subscribe? Alright, whatever, let's meet the team. The Jutes were the ones who got to Britain first and established the Kingdom of Kent. But them being ahead of the rest of the pack may reveal another reason why they came to Britain besides for fighting against the Picts: agriculture. While the Roman Empire was urbanizing, it suddenly got cold. Like, really cold. Okay, actually the temperature dropped by about 1 degree Celsius, but that's a big deal, okay? It decreased the amount of time for sowing and it increased the risk of crop failure. Nevertheless, Kent and the rest of the British East Coast was great for agriculture. But unfortunately, in the Middle Ages, new farming techniques took a long time to spread out. Especially in Britain, where most farmers were free men who worked for their own food, not for any lord. Which meant that they didn't have the security or the knowledge of the people under those lords, which is more common in Southern Europe. But if a turtle perseveres, it can indeed make it to the end. Free farmers started working together in villages, where they shared acres with each other. And because they were often located by a river, word of the new revolutionary techniques such as crop rotation eventually traveled upstream and downstream to every corner of the island. With some help of the Frankish Empire, of course, who Kent had a nice trade system with due to their close proximity, at one point even marrying a Frankish princess. Kent was the main pit stop between Blighty and civilization. One way to keep an economy running is by keeping the transaction costs as low as possible. When a peasant in North Africa wants to sell their pottery to an aristocrat in Rome, he will take into account the effort it took to make it and the cost of transporting the ceramics to the city, and thus raise the price of the product. These are transaction costs, and the Roman Empire was a powerhouse in keeping these costs low with their extensive trading network in Mare Nostrum. Long distances were a breeze. The political instability in the empire in the 5th and 6th century made the aristocrats poorer, and most would flee to the countryside and spend their remaining money on protection. Metal mines would start closing their businesses, so the coins used in these transactions lost value. The baller notices this and raises their prices even more, as does everyone else, and so the resulting inflation meant that the even poorer aristocrats couldn't buy the products anymore. No money equals no food, and everyone went back to farming. But this time, due to the harsher climate, no surplus could be produced. Roman cities once known for their prowess in trade declined, including the Britannic capital, Londinium. The people who now occupied this land were known as Eastern Saxons and Middle Saxons, or Essex and Middlesex for short. It's not clear if these two kingdoms were completely separate or united in some way, but they definitely had a deeper relationship going on. Once the agriculture improved like we saw with Kent, the surplus of food allowed people to once again craft other things and sell them on these nifty new markets. London became a key city in the trade routes between markets around the North Sea, including the Frankish Kentovik and Dorestad, alongside the Kentish Canterbury. Even their famous wool trade during the late Middle Ages got its start here. While the market of London wasn't as important as the markets of mainland Francia, where exotic products from the east mostly went, there's a very good reason why it's the capital of the UK today. Londinium merely threw the torch across the Dark Ages, and Essex caught it. The Byzantine Empire dreamed of once again reuniting the entire Roman Empire, but reality must have caught up to them as soon as the Lombards conquered the Italian peninsula not too long after the Byzantines gained control over it. Or at least, most of it. The Lombards were honestly just as incompetent as the Byzantines, and so both sides had to settle on this awkward border. A massive isthmus between Rome and Ravenna will be recognized by a lot of you as the borders of the Papal States. While the Byzantines left the place alone in order to deal with their own existential crisis, the popes of Rome gradually began to rule over this place, one of the first being Gregory the Great, who at that point was already in control of most of Rome's public services anyways. He laid the groundwork for what would become the Papal States about a century later, and also played a big role in the Christianization of the mostly Arian Lombards, Visigoths, and Franks. Whoa, Francia, who's that you're training with? A pagan! So since the Roman or Britons had already been driven to the edges, and the Anglo-Saxons were never part of the Roman Empire, the island had mostly reverted back to their pagan beliefs. And thus the Gregorian mission arrived in Kent, which was pretty easy to convert, because that Frankish princess was a Christian already. Hey Essex, East Anglia, have you heard of this thick new Christian stuff? Here, let me show you. The Angles first settled in this little area where they united the North folk and South folk, or Norfolk and Suffolk for the Friends, into one entity known as East Anglia. Alongside Kent and Essex, they mostly stayed on the east coast, just doing some trade and not getting into too much conflict with their neighbours. Perhaps even being friends with those two? But with quotation marks between every letter in that word, Kent was probably the dominant one. East Anglia was the furthest place from Rome that the Gregorian mission would have an effect on, because in Northumbria, they were shown the door. Christianity would mostly be kept intact there as well. While Kent and Essex later reverted back to paganism anyway, East Anglia would do what most barbarians did at the time. Just add another one to the list of gods to worship, which wasn't allowed either, but hey, what was Rome gonna do about it? In any case, East Anglia, alongside Kent and Essex, would mostly sit in the corner while the big dogs of Mercia, Wessex and Northumbria competed over land. Oh, and I guess Sussex was also there. Sussex is the least important and least well documented of the seven, and there's not enough room for it here. However, you can laugh at the name all you want. The Angles who formed Mercia were the last to arrive on the island, but it didn't take long before everyone would know of their name. The reason why Mercia out of the entire Heptarchy became dominant was because they actually took advantage of the free land to their west. All they had to do was brutally slaughter any Brittonic who would oppose them. But I mean, hey, I get it. If I was a leader of Birmingham, I would probably want to expand as far away as possible from that place as well. The period of time that followed is known as the Mercian supremacy. East Anglia, Essex, Kent, Sussex, and even Wessex would be under their control at one point. In the meantime though, let's build a dike to make sure that those Britons stop bothering us. Oh wait, that's just the Welsh border. At this time, Wales wasn't doing much of anything. Kingdoms like Gwynedd, Dyfed, and Powys couldn't really fight each other because they were too busy fighting everyone else. Then cut off from Cornwall by Wessex at the Battle of Durham, and cut off from Strathclyde by Northumbria at the Battle of Chester. With a chip on his shoulder the side of Ireland, Gwynedd would force Mercia into an alliance, and they punished the Northumbrians together. Such are the contradictions of the Heptarchy. But of course, when Mercia decided to go for its empire, Gwynedd was defeated faster than you can say At the start of the 9th century, the cracks in the Mercian supremacy started to appear. Wessex broke off, and the final power struggle between the Anglo-Saxons began. But before we talk about that, here's a brief intermission. When we left off, Northumbria had closed the door in front of the face of the Gregorian mission and had punted Gwynedd across the room. But Christianity is like a chocolate stain. You can never truly get rid of it. Gwynedd had already killed the previous Northumbrian kings of Venetia and Deira during that whole expedition with Mercia. The new king, however, was a Christian, and made sure to convert his citizens and build a bunch of monasteries, which were mostly meant for monks to live in and for Christians to visit for pilgrimage, which meant that they had two very important aspects to them. They were filthy rich and completely undefended. In 793, the monastery in Lindisfarne was raided by peoples from Scandinavia. The Viking Age had begun. After a while, the Scandinavians got the genius idea of simply owning the damn place instead of just raiding it a bunch. But the question was, where would they start? Kent, Essex and Sussex have already been subjugated by their neighbours at this point, so of the remaining Wessex, East Anglia, Mercia and Northumbria, which one would be the weakest link? Yup, it's East Anglia, you could have guessed that. The Great Heathen Army, yeah, the British really want to make their history sound like the coolest shit ever, conquered East Anglia and Northumbria, establishing the Danelaw. This wasn't one united territory, but a sort of confederacy of kingdoms where the law of the Danes was in effect, as opposed to the laws of the Anglo-Saxons. Speaking of them, I wonder how that power struggle went. Okay, yeah, if you weren't able to pick up on it yet, Wessex won. Mercia suffered from attacks from the Danes, but was somehow still limping on, so they might as well bring that place under their overlordship. The enemy of my enemy is my friend after all. And so from the great markets of London they would march all the way north to Edinburgh, getting rid of the Danes once and for all. till they came back, but we don't talk about that. Hey Wessex, we did it! You're still alive? And then there was one. The Heptarchy is finally over, and England has been unified, but ruling over it would be a whole different issue. Hey, thank you for watching. As usual, subscribe if you want to see more Pole and Ball videos. The next one will be the third Vexillology volume, where we'll be talking about flags in space. Ooh. Also go ahead and check out my community tab, because I post the art for the upcoming video daily as a teaser. There are going to be a few polls in there as well. Alright, see ya.